This is a comprehensive and critical ranking of all 46 Illinois state parks from the point of view of a day hiker. Some Illinoisans may argue with me and tell me that there are more than 46 Illinois state parks, but I have a system that I use that determines what listed parks count as state parks for my visits. Any DNR location listing that ends with the word state park gets added to the list of places I go. With that, let's get into the parks. 46. William G. Stratton. William G. Stratton State Park is 18 acres on the Illinois River in Morris. This park should simply be designated as a state riverside access area or something because it has no real hiking trails. The park simply consists of a giant parking lot attached to 4 boat ramps on the Illinois River, with a small section of the Illinois and Michigan Canal Trail running through the park. Small park plus no real scenery equals bottom of the list. 45. Gebhard Woods. Morris, Illinois really took all the L's when it comes to state parks. It's the only municipality in Illinois that has 2 state parks, and they ranked as the bottom 2. Kind of hilarious. Anyway, Gebhard Woods is slightly larger than William G. Stratton State Park and is set further away from the river. There is an actual trail here, which mostly leads to a dead end on the park's lawn. It did feel like a small state park, to which I'll give it credit, but the lack of trails left it near the bottom. 44. Rock Island Trail. Another place I feel should be designated differently. Rock Island Trail State Park is simply a long trail that runs along an old rail line between Toulon and Peoria. I only did a mile of the trail because I can't be asked to do more, especially when it was pouring rain. Besides, looking at the geography of the quote-unquote park, it looks mostly the same throughout. On most signs, the trail is actually designated as Rock Island State Trail, which is what it should be designated as, in my opinion. Not much else to say here. 43. Prophetstown. Another park that might suffer because of its designation, but at least these parks made the list, were dozens of IDNR properties that are designated correctly as things other than state parks did not. Prophetstown State Park, or Prophetstown State Recreation Area, as noted on the sign, is a small park with a playground, campground, and boat ramps on the Rock River. Unlike the last 3 parks, I was actually able to do a hiking loop here, walking through the closed campground and taking the trail along Coon Creek back to the car. Loop was barely a mile, but had some nice wildflowers along the way. 42. Delarbar. If a park had uninteresting as the main descriptor, this would be it. Delarbar State Park is 89 acres on the Mississippi River just north of Oquawka. I was actually able to hike the 2-mile loop here, which was nice, but also incredibly boring. Simply a flat trail through some trees. I literally only took 5 pictures here in my whole visit because it simply wasn't that exciting. 41. Red Hills. Venturing to southern Illinois for the first time, Red Hills State Park is just under 1,000 acres west of Lawrenceville and has 6 miles of trails. This park suffered from having no trail link connecting the northern trails with the southern ones. I ended up doing the 4 miles of quote-unquote trails south of the road, which were faintly present, unmowed patches of grass that I struggled to follow. There was also a lake at this park. I never really got to see it though. The trails go through the mostly uninteresting and overgrown parts of the park. I could not rank it higher. For the entire 90 minutes of hiking here, I was just begging for it to be over. 40. Fort Massac. Continuing in southern Illinois, Fort Massac State Park is a popular 1,500-acre park east of Metropolis on the Ohio River. It was kind of disappointing to see the amount of litter in this park, but the park mainly suffered from the same thing Delarbar suffered from, being uninteresting. I did a 3-mile loop here, half paved trail, half dirt and grass trail. This 3-mile loop basically encompassed every trail in the park aside from some short walking paths near the fort. The whole second half smelled like dead animal, so that was fun. By far the coolest part of this park is walking under the I-24 bridge, which runs right over the park. Easily my best pictures of this park. 39. Sangchris Lake. Right in the center of the state, Sangchris Lake is just southeast of Springfield and is 3,000 acres. Like some parks I've visited in other states, the park mainly suffered from high water. The trails I planned on taking were underwater, and the alternate routes were incredibly overgrown. I could not win. There were also some mosquitoes here, not as many as I've seen at some parks, but they were present here. The fact that the trails did not come near the enormous lake did not help either. The lake is the park's main asset, and the only trails that run along it are long out and backs, which sucks. 38. Horseshoe Lake. If you want flat hiking, this is the park for you. It doesn't get much more flat than the Mississippi River floodplain. Horseshoe Lake State Park is just under 3,000 acres on an oxbow lake of the Mississippi River and has about 4 miles of trails. The outer loop of the lake's island is about 3.5 miles and was the hike I did. Since it was so flat, wet spots could creep up on you, but were also easy to dodge because of the flat terrain. The center of the island used to be farm fields and is now open prairie. You only ever get a few views of the lake from the trail, but they are nice. This is a good park. The main thing it suffers from is being unexciting. 37. Nauvoo. Illinois' westernmost state park is Nauvoo State Park in Nauvoo. The city is on the Mississippi River, but the park is not. However, you can get some nice views of the valley from the lake and the park. However, Illinois DNR, I cannot stress to you enough, this park needs a trail map. It could be so awesome if people just knew how to hike around the lake. Horton Lakes is the park's main physical feature, with a short 2-mile trail that loops it. There were some fishermen out when I got there, so I imagine it isn't unpopular. The park has 3 miles of trails, with the other mile running through the historic buildings located in the park. Overall, kind of a cute little spot in western Illinois. 36. Lincoln Trail Homestead. Another park that needs a map posted online. This park also just suffers from being small. It's 162 acres on the Sangamon River just west of Decatur. This park has a short 1-mile loop through the woods and then along the river, which is well groomed. The only map of the park I found was at the picnic shelter, so if you plan to hike here, stop at the shelter first and take a picture. You can also walk or drive down to the end of the road where the original Lincoln cabin was. Another nice little park that suffers from the same thing Nauvoo does. 35. Beall Woods. Beall Woods State Park is 639 acres in Wabash County and has 8 miles of trails. This park had some interesting highs and lows. First, this was easily the worst park I found for mosquitoes in the entire state of Illinois, and it was the only park where I had to run from them. Also, the trail map doesn't show the bridge to the Ridgeway Trail being knocked out, which means the trail entirely has no access right now. It was nice to see some exposed bedrock way down in southeast Illinois, which is a reminder of what was to come, since this was the last park I did before the Shawnee Hills. The biggest thing that saved this park from being bottom 10 was this little waterfall on Coffee Creek. I spent 10 minutes hanging out here because of the sun exposure and lack of mosquitoes. This park was also the highest ranked park in the southern Illinois region of the state. 34. Fort Defiance. Illinois' southernmost state park is not far from the state's southernmost point. Fort Defiance State Park is 62 acres at the confluence of Mississippi and Ohio rivers. This confluence is also the lowest point in Illinois at 279 feet above sea level. A short observation platform overlooks the joining of the rivers in the park, and there are some picnic tables underneath it. The park has no trails. It is simply a point for one to come and see the rivers join. I imagine Frisbee is popular in the fields in the middle of the park, though. 33. Walnut Point. This park was a nice short walk in the woods, but nothing really special. Walnut Point State Park is 472 acres in southeastern Douglas County, not far from Illinois' border with Indiana. The park has about 5 miles of trails, which I did 2 of. The trails are simply a set of small loops in the woods on the southwest side of the park. The park also lost points for not having a connected trail system. There were 3 places to hike, 2 of which had less than a mile of trails, so I opted for the biggest option. This park also has a medium-sized man-made lake for fishing. 32. Lincoln Trail. Similar to Walnut Point, Lincoln Trail State Park only had trails in two corners of the park. The trail I chose was well groomed and made of gravel, but was also kind of buggy. The 3-mile airstrip trail was incredibly flat and easy to hike though, which was nice. Lincoln Trail State Park also has a lake like Walnut Point, and I drove around it after my hike. The park is a little over 1,100 acres south of Marshall in far eastern Illinois. 31. Jubilee College. I honestly expected better from this park, but the trail map of the park was completely wrong. I've never seen a worse trail map. It didn't help that the hike was incredibly wet and muddy the whole way through. The park should also mention that there are no bridges to cross Jubilee Creek anywhere in the park, so I could only experience the south side of the park. Jubilee College State Park is a large wooded park northwest of Peoria. I imagine Peoria residents like it when it isn't in horrible condition, especially when you know the trail system. The park is over 3,000 acres and has over 15 miles of trails. 30. Argyle Lake. If you're looking for places to hike while staying in Peoria, stay in the city. Peoria's city parks are immeasurably better than the state parks near town. Argyle Lake was the highest ranked park that I visited while I was in Peoria, and it barely cracked the top 30. The park had excellent scenery, far better than any other park in the area, but the buckets of rain from days prior made the trails a nightmare to navigate. It also didn't help to keep the bugs away. The lake itself is really pretty, and there's a nice trail on the south side of the lake along the Moraine River as well. The biggest hit to this park was the short section of horse trail I did on the north side of the park. About halfway through, I was basically walking through a wetland. The area had no drainage whatsoever. The 9-mile loop I did at this park was okay, however, and there were more trails besides the ones I did too. 29. Illini. Returning to northern Illinois, Illini State Park is a medium-sized park across the Illinois River from Marseille. Finding a usable trail map for this park was next to impossible, thanks Illinois DNR, but Apple Maps came in clutch with it showing a small 2-mile loop following the river on the west side of the park. It was a pleasant little walk, and I got to watch a barge go by on the river while I was hiking. This was also the same day I did Gebhard Woods and William G. Stratton, the bottom two parks, so it was nice to go to a real state park, even if it was kind of small. 28. James Pate Phillip. In the middle of the western suburbs, James Pate Phillip State Park is small and flat, but does contain 4 miles of flat trails for residents to enjoy. The prairie landscape of this park showcased snakes, frogs, and mice while I walked through the park, so watch for wildlife if you go. While it was a nice walk, it was also incredibly boring, so I could not put the park any higher than 28. 27. Channahon. We continue in northern Illinois with Illinois' smallest state park, Channahon State Park in Channahon. This park links up to the Illinois and Michigan Canal Bike Trail, but other than that, doesn't have any trails. The 14-acre park mainly exists to showcase a piece of the lock and dam system that is still standing from the canal. Despite its size, a heavily flowing dam and small man-made waterfall in the lock made this park surprisingly scenic and a great place for a picnic. 26. Lake Murphysboro. Jumping way down to the southern end of the state now, Lake Murphysboro State Park is just over 1,000 acres on a man-made lake in Jackson County. The park lacks in trails with only about 2 miles, but these 2 miles are incredibly well groomed with bridges over every creek crossing and a big stairway into the valley. This was also the first park in the Shawnee Hills area, so it was cool seeing southern forests take shape. This park should also be noted for its role in internet culture, as it is the place where the "It Do Go Down" video took place. 25. Beaver Dam. Beaver Dam State Park is a small but pleasant park in McAlpin County between Springfield and St. Louis. With 750 acres and 4 miles of trails, the park created a perfect 3-mile loop through the woods, marsh, and on the south side of the lake. The lake trail is perfect too because it hugs the lake very tightly throughout the circuit, so you will always have a water view. There were a few bugs here, but overall they were manageable and the trails were in awesome condition. 24. Cave-in Rock. Okay, I might get grilled for putting Cave-in Rock in the bottom half, but the lack of mosquitoes in most Illinois state parks made it especially bad when they were a problem. And when I say they were a problem at Cave and Rock, they were a problem, all caps. If you are near any shade anywhere in the park, they will find you, and you have to be in the middle of a sunny field for them to leave you alone. I think the only exception was when I was down by the cave, which makes sense since there are no plants down there. The Riverwalk and cave area were easily the coolest parts of my 2-mile hike in this 200-acre park. The short segment through the woods at the beginning of my hike was filled with bugs and steep hills. Probably wouldn't do it again. Cave and Rock was the lowest ranked park properly in the Shawnee Hills, which contain 4 Illinois state parks. 23. Morrison-Rockwood. Entering the top half, we have a park that lives up to its name. Morrison-Rockwood State Park sits just north of the town of Morrison, and the park contains both rock and wood. The rock is hard to find, but there are some short limestone outcroppings down by the fittingly named Rock Creek on the southeast side of the park. The loop I was hiking was predominantly horse trails, which were surprisingly well groomed. I hardly got a view of Lake Carlton, the main recreational feature of the park, but the trail system here is robust and the scenery is pretty good. At around 1,200 acres, the park has over 10 miles of trails. I did about 7 of them. They had a nice variety from prairie on the west and east sides of the park, with forests on the north and south sides. 22. Castle Rock. The first of 3 state parks in the Oregon area, Castle Rock State Park consists of 3 units. I hiked the whole north unit, which was 5 miles, and also stopped at the overlook on the river. If there were trail links between all 3 units of this park, it would rank higher, but the scenery in the main hiking area wasn't that interesting. I had trouble finding 5 pictures good enough to put in my photo album. The park has about 9 miles of trails and is about 2,000 acres. If you go, be sure to stop at the real Castle Rock because the overlooks on the river are the best part of this state park. 21. Eagle Creek. For our next park, we traveled to Lake Shelbyville in central Illinois. This enormous reservoir is over 11,000 acres and is made by the damming of the Kaskaskia River. On the west side of the lake is Eagle Creek State Park, which used to be a state recreation area until a few years ago. The park has several large campgrounds and is near a golf course, which drives a lot of the traffic to the park. I hiked about 5 miles here, and they all had excellent trail conditions and views of the lake. The only reason it didn't rank higher is because parks above it simply had better scenery. I don't have a whole lot else to say here. This was a very nice park. 20. Fox Ridge. Staying in central Illinois, the Embarrass River flows through Charleston and along the western edge of Fox Creek State Park, a large hiking-centric park with many creek valleys. I hiked 15 miles here, and about half of them were good, half of them were bad. The whole 3-mile section along the river was poorly mowed and the grass was up to my waist. It had rained the night before, so I was soaked at the end of this section. The horse trail wasn't that great either, but I expected that. The area at the south end of the park, where most of the trails are, is definitely the most scenic and well-traveled area in the park. This park could have easily cracked the top 15 if the Illinois DNR mowed their trails, but sadly, it will sit at 20th. 19. Wolf Creek. On the other side of Lake Shelbyville, Wolf Creek State Park is one of the largest in Illinois. I hiked this entire park and it was a fever dream. I was literally at the park from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. I covered 21 miles of the park's trails, which is almost all of them. The first section that I did was the big horse trail at the north end of the park. It was literally hike out to a peninsula, to the lake, and then hike back in. I did this a dozen times probably. The southern part of the park was more interesting. It was mostly more of the same, but the trails were in much better condition. I'm just glad it was on a big lake because doing 21 miles in the woods with no body of water nearby would have been mind-numbing. I did this on the same day as Eagle Creek, which took me to a total of 26 miles for the day. 18. Chain O' Lakes. In Chicago's northwest suburbs lies Chain O' Lakes State Park, a large park with shoreline on several glacial lakes and ponds. With over 15 miles of trails, the park is popular with hikers and fishermen. The horse trails here were in surprisingly good condition, but finding a trail map of them was kind of hard. Illinois DNR, seriously, hire someone to make trail maps of your parks because these things are unusable. Aside from that, this was genuinely a nice park with lots of variety. I like glacial topography because it's unpredictable and irregular, which makes the scenery more interesting. It's even better when the forest and prairie are mixed like they are in Illinois, southern Wisconsin and Minnesota, and northern North Dakota. I think the lack of a good trail map and better trail conditions at other parks were the only things that kept this park out of the top 15. 17. Lowden. Our second park in the Oregon area, Lowden State Park, is just north of Oregon on the Rock River. Now, aside from this abomination of a trail map, this was a really cool little park with great trails and awesome views. Climbing from the Rock River banks to the overlook with the Blackhawk statue was easily my favorite part, and you can also see some limestone outcroppings, reminding you that you aren't far from the driftless area. The park is just under 300 acres and has 4 miles of trails. 16. Buffalo Rock. This small park on the Illinois River looks cool when you first drive in, but is only okay compared to other parks in the area. The park has 3 miles of trails and consists of a large rock in the Illinois River called Buffalo Rock. The rock rises about 100 feet out of the water and has a mixed prairie landscape on top of it. The best part of the park is the south side of the trail loop because it has a few overlooked decks where you can really see the river. Other than that, this small park's scenery and size were the things that put it 16th. 15. Weldon Springs. Entering the top 15, Weldon Springs State Park is 550 acres just south of Clinton and far exceeded my expectations. I haven't had a whole lot of success finding state parks with small man-made lakes that keep their trail conditions as well as Iowa does theirs, but this park did a fantastic job. Not only that, but there are more trails besides just the ones on the lake, totaling nearly 10 miles. I did 8 miles, and aside from the one flooded section down near Salt Creek, they were in excellent condition and had a ton of variety. I went from a mixed prairie forest to a full-on forest, to a lakeside gravel path, to an old farm on the north side of the park, and back along the lake again. After a few days of doing parks that ranked in the 30s, Weldon Springs was exactly what I needed, and it proves that Central Illinois can be subtly scenic with a little work. Weldon Springs State Park is the highest ranked park in the East Central Illinois region of the map. 14. Dixon Springs. In Pope County, a small 800-acre piece of land comprises Dixon Springs State Park. This park was mainly held back by its size. If the park had 400 more acres and a few more miles of trails, it would be a shoo-in for the top 10. The park's trail system is only 3 miles total, which is why the park ranks so low, but limestone outcroppings, cliffside waterfalls, and the heavily flowing hills branch add to the park's stunning scenery. The Shawnee Hills are truly next level for scenery in Illinois, and it's shown by a small park like this ranking in the top 15. I also went down to the spillway and waterfall down by the campground, and boy was it flowing. Highly recommend this spot for a short jaunt if you're ever in the Shawnee Hills. 13. Siloam Springs. Did I just rank the 3 Springs parks consecutively? Yes. Did I do it on purpose? Maybe. Siloam and Weldon were already in their spots when Dixon Springs came along with excellent scenery and not a lot of acres, so I put it right in between. Anyway, Siloam Springs State Park stands alone in Pate County in far western Illinois. This park is as far away from everything as you can get in Illinois, and that's a good thing, because it would be a shame if people came and ruined it. I really did not expect to see this many rock outcroppings and cliffs when I rolled up to this park, but the south side of the park on McKee Creek has some impressive ones that rise up to 50 feet above the trail. The only part of the park that was kind of rough was the sunny grassy trail on the southwest side of the park, but it was short and faded from my memory quickly. I did the full 8-mile loop in Siloam Springs and would recommend the full loop to anyone looking to get out for a few hours. The 3,300-acre park has a few more miles of trails that run through the middle of the park, bringing the total trail mileage to around 12. And for those who like water, Crabapple Lake is the park's main water feature and looks like a nice quiet place for a paddle or going to fish. Siloam Springs State Park is the highest ranked state park in the western Illinois region of the state. 12. Moraine Hills. Finishing out my B tier of parks, Moraine Hills State Park in Chicago's northwest suburbs ranks 12th on my list. Now, if anyone from the Illinois DNR is watching this, this is how you do a trail map, not whatever you have for the rest of the state parks right now. While this park was crowded, it was also quite pretty and the trails were well maintained throughout. The Fox River and a half-dozen glacial lakes in the park really helped the park in terms of scenery. It is a pretty park, even when I visited in early spring. Lake Defiance is by far the most impressive of the lakes in the park, and the section of trail on the east side of the lake is the prettiest section in the park. I don't have much else to say other than I recommend the park to those who haven't gone and live in Chicagoland. 11. White Pines Forest. The final Oregon area park just barely cracks the A tier of parks at rank 11. White Pines Forest State Park is about 400 acres in Ogle County and contains a little over 5 miles of trails. The park has a decent trail map, thanks Illinois DNR, and the trails are really pretty. The main downside of the park was the amount of people there. That was the single thing that kept White Pines Forest out of the top 10. This park is like the Driftless area, but for those who want to make the extra 1-hour drive west from Chicago. Limestone cliffs and deep blue spring-fed water makes Pine Creek unique for north-central Illinois and quite popular with people who live there. There are several bridges and stepping stones over the creek, so you don't have to get wet while hiking either. 10. Rock Cut. Entering the top 10, Rock Cut State Park is a 3,200-acre park east of Rockford, not far from the Wisconsin border. I didn't think this one would still be in the top 10 at the end, but here we are. A large park with well-maintained trails and good scenery is a good way to describe this park. I did the outer loop of trails, which just barely went over 10 miles, including a short segment down near Pere Lake, the park's main body of water. If you hike this whole park, you will find several small waterfalls on the creeks that weave toward Pere Lake. Another interesting fact, this is the lowest ranked park with elevations of over 900 feet above sea level in the state, with the park topping out at 928 feet. All 3 other parks in this range ranked in the top 10 as well. The park has another dozen or so trails in addition to the trail I hiked, and is very clearly an outdoor destination for people who live in Rockford. If you are ever looking for a quintessential Midwest state park experience, Rock Cut would be the place to go. The southeast part of the park is a beautiful pine forest like something out of Wisconsin. The southwest has a few rock quarries with cliffs, while the northwest is more prairie and has more terrain variation. And finally, the northeast part of the park is easily the most flat part, so if you want a less strenuous hike, head that direction. There's always the lake too. It seems most people know about this park, but if you haven't been here and you live in Chicagoland, you should probably go. 9. Apple River Canyon. Illinois' northwesternmost state park also happens to be its highest, with the park reaching elevations of 948 feet above sea level, which for Illinois is downright alpine. The park is managed as several units, but the main unit with the office and the campground is the most scenic, has the most amenities and hiking trails. 3 miles of trails crisscross the park with a few loops along the canyon rim and into the pine forest. Illinois has 2 state parks in the Driftless area, and visiting here felt like an accomplishment since I now have visited every single state park in the Driftless area, all 26 of them. 8. Mississippi Palisades. From my final Driftless park to the final Driftless park you will hear ranked on this channel, Mississippi Palisades State Park is 2,355 acres in Carroll County, just north of Savannah. This is the 3rd park in a row with elevations of over 900 feet, with the bluffs and palisades in this park rising more than 300 feet above the mighty Mississippi River. The northwest corner of Illinois is one of the prettiest regions in the state, and these last 2 parks are a great addition to a trip to Galena. Now, originally when I was planning this year's set of parks out, I thought Mississippi Palisades would rank in the top 5. The biggest fault of this park? The fragmented trail system. The north and south ends of the park are not connected by any trails, so a third of my hike was walking along park roads, which were nice, don't get me wrong, but if the park had trails linking the entire park, it would be so much better. Also, Mississippi Palisades is the highest ranked park in the northwestern Illinois region of the state. 7. Adeline J. Geo-Karis, Illinois Beach. Okay, to start off with, I'm just going to call this park Illinois Beach State Park for the remainder of the segment. This was actually the first park I visited, so it remained high in the ranking for the entire duration of my journey, and was actually in the top 5 all the way until the Shawnee Hills. Thanks to UIUC for the park's trail map, another Illinois DNR trail map failure, I hiked 5 miles in the southern unit of the park, and they were all pretty good. I saw several deer on the side of the loop away from the lake, and the lakeside was really nice. My favorite trail might have been the Dead River Trail, though. Illinois Beach State Park is over 4,000 acres and is composed of 2 units of roughly equal size just south of the Wisconsin border. It is also Illinois' only state park on Lake Michigan. 6. Kankakee River. This one surprised me big time. At first I was having trouble finding a loop that I could do because the Illinois DNR map did not show all of the trails in the park, but I made one using the Park Road Bike Trail and Rock Creek Loop on the north side of Illinois Highway 102. This loop is 6.6 miles and is probably the best place to hike in the park. The park is composed of 9 miles of the Kankakee River and the land immediately on both sides. I have a feeling bikers enjoy this park because of the extensive trail that runs along both sides of the river in some places. Rock Creek is the best spot for hiking, though. If you decide to descend into the ravine, choose a path wisely and do so safely, but it is so worth it. I spent like 10 minutes down there just sitting and listening to the creek. You can follow the creek all the way to 5000 Road or curve back towards the north parking area. Lots of options north of the road, and I would say this and Apple River Canyon are the parks that are most underrated in the top 10. 5. Matthiessen. Entering the top 5 and the S tier of parks, these final 5 rank a league above the rest. Some people might rank Matthiessen higher because of the lack of people compared to other outdoor spots in the area, but I found the opposite. Since there is only one canyon at Matthiessen, everyone is in it, making it so much harder to navigate because of how many people there are. Not only that, this park also took a hit because of the long prairie section between the north and south trail areas. It was not mowed at all. The southern section of trails was genuinely awesome, and I would recommend more people check it out. There's an unnamed creek that has several short waterfalls and rapids along it near the trail before it feeds into the Vermilion River, which in my opinion is more impressive than the Illinois because of its narrow valley and rocky bottom. In terms of the park's volume, it takes a major win because of the nearly 20 miles of trails located within it. Overall, if you've been to Matthiessen, seeing both ends of the park are like different worlds, and I would recommend trying to see both at least once. 4. Pere Marquette. The top 5 parks are geographically split in an interesting way. There are 2 pairs of 2 near each other, while one stands alone. Pere Marquette is the one that stands alone. Located at the confluence of the Illinois and Mississippi rivers, glaciers pushed all the extra debris to this point at the confluence, which results in the highest points on the bluff being 901 feet above sea level, the 4th and final park to top out above 900 in Illinois. I could compare this to many places in driftless Wisconsin, but this place has its own central Illinois charm and makes it stand out as different from those in some way. The biggest thing to be expecting from a visit to this park are incredible views. From Goat Cliff to McAdams Peak, this park has several overlooks looking out both south and west into the river valley and an incredible trail system to showcase them. At around 10 miles of trails, the outer loop of trails here totals about 7.5 miles, and it's all great hiking through hillside forests along limestone and sandstone cliffs and on hilltop prairies. The trail up to McAdams Peak is genuinely one of the prettiest trails in all of Illinois. Be sure that after you visit the park or on your way into the park, drive Illinois Highway 100 with the towering sandstone bluffs along the Mississippi between Grafton and Alton, one of the most unique roads in Illinois. Pere Marquette is also the top-ranked park in the central Illinois region of the state. 3. Giant City. This park absolutely met expectations, and I'm glad I did all I could here. I hiked an incredible 19 miles at this park, and nearly all of them were amazing. I literally showed up at this park at 8 a.m. and left at 4:30 p.m. I hiked the entire day, and it was an amazing use of my time. The outer loop here mostly consists of the Red Cedar Backpack Trail and the Horse Trail, which is better in some places than others. The first 3 miles of hiking were pretty boring and mostly on the Horse Trail, but after that there were only a few spots where I wished I wasn't hiking. For example, there was a spot in the southwest part of the park that was totally underwater. The top 2 spots did not have any parts like this, so that's why they ranked higher. I added the Trillium Trail and Giant City Trail to my loop, and it was an incredible decision. The Trillium Trail features a 200-foot sandstone and limestone bluff where first you hike along the bottom of it and then on the top. The Giant City Trail is the main attraction of the park and takes you on a walk through the best and most imposing rock formations in the park as well. If you're looking for places off the beaten path, the northwest side of the park has some incredible cliffs where you're hiking and the horse trails crisscross, but getting there is a bit of a challenge. Finally, the park has a secret waterfall that hardly anyone knows about, and I posted a video of it on my channel earlier. If you want to know the location of this waterfall, feel free to take a look at the other video or ask in the comments here. It's probably the park's best kept secret. 2. Ferne Clyffe. These top 2 parks were incredibly close, but in the end, Ferne Clyffe State Park simply didn't have something that the other did, despite the incredible variety across both parks. First off, the horse trails here are maintained like they could be hiking trails too, and I was very grateful. My hike down the cliff in the southwest corner of the park was memorable, and the Creek Valley was fantastic. At 2,430 acres, Ferne Clyffe State Park has over a dozen miles of trails, and is one of just a few parks in Illinois where if I were to visit again, I would do the exact same hiking loop that I did the first time. There wasn't a single part of the park that was boring. I went from a high rocky cliff to a low creek valley to a round bluff, the big rocky formation on the south side of the park. From there I walked around the lake, which had unique cypress knees of the south, and I came up to the Blackjack Oak Trail, which had the best views in the whole park from on the ridge. I followed the connector trail through the campground and to the waterfall, which was unfortunately barely flowing. From there I did Redmond's Trail, which had multiple better flowing waterfalls, and then I finished at Hawks Cave, which is enormous. The boulders in these pictures are twice the size of humans. This isn't the only part of the park though. Bork Falls is also in a second unit of the park and is a great spot to relax by or in the water. The Bork Falls unit is a small section of multi-use trails for horseback riders to use. Ferne Clyffe is the highest ranked state park in the Shawnee Hills region of the state. 1. Starved Rock. Whether you like it or not, I ranked Starved Rock number 1, but it was really close. The deciding factor that resulted in it keeping its spot was that beautiful section of trail right along the Illinois River. I actually liked it better than the dozen canyons that are scattered throughout the park. This ranking was so close, in fact, that if I went on a Saturday, this park would probably be number 2 instead of number 1. Starved Rock State Park has about 20 miles of trails, and I hiked about 15 of them. I parked just west of St. Louis Canyon at 7 a.m. and walked all along the river to Illinois Canyon, and then walked down each canyon on the way back. My favorite canyon was probably Ottawa Canyon at the far east end of the park, but the St. Louis Canyon is good too. Starved Rock is also the most popular state park I've ever been to, with over 15,000 reviews on Google Maps. Overall, Starved Rock really has it all, from waterfalls, high cliffs, deep canyons, clear streams, and a wonderful riverfront, and all that led it to top my ranking of Illinois state parks. A few things I'd like to mention before I end the video. First, I want to thank my family for being way more supportive than I deserve when I do this. Second, this has proven that I'll probably be doing one state every year no matter what happens, because some idiot totaled my car while it was parked in a hotel parking lot in Joliet about 10 days into my journey. Luckily, I was able to get a rental for the time it took to get my car fixed, and I was able to get my own car back on May 2nd, earlier than I expected and about 2 weeks after it got hit. Since I was able to sufficiently balance parks and coordinating car repairs, I think this proves that these missions can withstand a few curveballs, and it would take a lot to keep me from finishing a state once I've started. So expect to see more videos in the coming years. Finally, Missouri, you're next, so you better open or unlist those 3 closed state parks that are listed on your site before the end of 2024, because I'm coming whether you like it or not. Thank you all for watching, and be sure to leave a comment down below if you have your own thoughts about the parks, or if you think I complain too much about bugs, because that's what the Minnesotans think. Hopefully I'll be back before the end of 2024 with a surprise video that outdoor lovers might enjoy. Keep exploring.